Hello, this is Chef John from foodwishes.com with Lobster Newberg. That's right, not only is this recipe fast and delicious, it's also the most famous anagram in culinary history, as this was invented by a man named Ben Wenberg, who showed it to a friend of his who owned a restaurant, and he put it on the menu, where it became very popular until they had a big argument, at which point the restaurant owner, just to screw with this guy's head, rearranged the letters in the name, and Lobster Wenberg became Lobster Newberg. And if you've ever worked in a restaurant or known restaurant owners, you're probably thinking, yep, that sounds about right. But of course, none of that really matters. All we care about is how amazing this is. So let me show you how to put this together. And of course, it's going to require some lobster. And I'm going to use lobster tails for this. So I have four 4-ounce tails. So all we need to do at this point is take a sharp knife and split these lobster tails in half. And while the shell feels kind of hard, it actually is pretty easy to cut. Just put your knife right in the center like this. Cut straight down through, and then we'll just turn it and finish the cut, and that's pretty much it. And by the way, the original was done with whole lobsters, so the tails do make this a little more user-friendly. And sure, they're a little pricey, but every once in a while you do see them on sale. And while I generally don't recommend buying your food at stores that also sell tires and socks, every once in a while those big box stores sometimes have great deals on this kind of thing. So keep your antennae up. And then once we have those split, we're going to cook those in a little bit of clarified butter. But before we do, I do want to give them a little bit of salt. And by a little bit, I mean a generous amount. At which point, we're going to transfer those into a pan that's been set over medium-high heat with a little bit of clarified butter in the pan. And we'll place those lobster tails in, cut side down. And we're only going to cook them on that side for about 2 minutes. Okay, we're not trying to brown these. We just want to barely cook them through. So like I said, we'll go about 2 minutes on this side. Then we'll go ahead and flip them over and give them another minute or two on the shell side. And quite often in this recipe, it'll say to steam the lobster, which works. But using this technique, we're infusing that clarified butter in the pan with a ton of extra lobster flavor. So I do like this method better than steaming. And once those have been cooked for a couple minutes on each side, we'll go ahead and remove those to a plate to cool. And as soon as we've done that, I want you to go ahead and drizzle in a couple tablespoons of sherry or cognac or brandy or something like that into the pan, which of course is still pretty hot. And don't walk away, because all we're going to do is cook this for about 1 minute until it basically reduces in half, and it does not have to be exact. Just let it go until it looks like about half is evaporated away, and then we'll simply turn off the heat and just reserve that pan as is while we move on to prep the rest of the ingredients, which is pretty easy. All we need to do is wait for those lobster tails to get cool enough to handle, and you're simply going to pull out the meat, which is going to come out very, very easily. And by the way, if we have any lobster experts in the audience, my tails had some like bluish, blackish coloration along the bottom of the shell and near the tail fin, which I don't think is dangerous in any way. I just didn't like how it looks. What causes that? But anyway, we're going to pull that meat out of the tails. And of course, be careful. Don't lose any of those precious juices. So make sure you do this over a plate or a bowl. And then once you've liberated that meat, we're going to go ahead and give it a rough chop. Not too small, maybe 1/2-inch pieces. You know the drill. Pick a size and stick with it. So notwithstanding a few blue and black spots, that's looking pretty good. And then as I just mentioned, we're of course going to transfer those accumulated juices back into our pan. And at that point, we can move on to the last of the sauce ingredients. So in a bowl, we have some heavy cream, to which we're going to add 2 egg yolks. We're also going to add some cayenne pepper, a little more than just a little. And then last but not least, a little bit of freshly grated nutmeg. And we'll officially call that a pinch on the ingredient list. But of course, there was no pinching involved, since I always want you to grate this fresh. So a very, very simple sauce, just a few ingredients. And then we'll simply take a whisk and mix this up. And once that's mixed up, we are ready for final assembly. And do not move on to these last steps until you're ready to eat, because this dish comes together very, very quickly. But when we are ready, let's go ahead and dump our cream mixture into the pan, which as you remember contains our lobster-infused butter and that little bit of sherry reduction. And please keep in mind the heat's been off all this time. So we'll dump in our cream mixture, we'll whisk that in, and then we're going to do 2 things. We're going to set our heat between medium-low and medium, so just a notch above medium-low. And we'll also switch to a spatula, which allows me to stir and scrape the bottom of the pan. And all we're going to do is heat this mixture, stirring constantly until it slightly thickens. So it's getting close here. So we'll just keep stirring, keeping an eye on it. And what we're looking for isn't a super thick mixture. It's basically going to be thick enough to coat the back of a spoon, which is what we have right about here. So that's looking good. At that point, we're going to go ahead and dump in our lobster meat. And basically, as soon as that lobster is heated through, you're ready to serve. And by the way, it's easy to make a great Lobster Newberg, and it's easy to film a Lobster Newberg, but it's not easy to film a great Lobster Newberg. Okay, because I'm trying to get different shots and change camera positions. I kind of had to start and stop this a few times. And you know what? It kind of sounds like I'm complaining now, so I'm going to stop. So bottom line, this is going to be way easier for you than it was for me. So like I said, we'll just keep mixing that. And when we think that lobster is heated through, we're ready for the final steps, which is just a little seasoning. So I'm going to go ahead and stir in a little salt to taste. And then right before I spoon this up, I do like to add a little bit of fresh herb. This time I'm using a little bit of Italian parsley, but fresh tarragon is beautiful in this. You could also use chervil if you want, also very nice. But that's up to you. You are the Wenberg of your Newburg, so put what you like. And as soon as that's stirred in, we're ready to eat. And this is most commonly served over buttered toast, but we're going to fancy it up a little bit and serve it in these gorgeous puff pastry shells, which you can't buy anywhere. You're going to have to make those yourself. Luckily, I'm going to show you that technique in the next video. Very simple to do if you know the tricks. But anyway, whether you're using puff pastry or buttered toast, you're going to spoon that over. And of course, we're also going to want a generous amount of that sherry cream sauce. And regarding the sauce color, I kind of like the natural look. If you've seen Newburgs before and they were white, that's because they were done with a white wine. And then you'll also see versions that are red or orange, where people have added tomato, I guess to make the sauce look more lobstery. But I do like the natural look. And once that shell's been filled, we'll pop on the top. And that Lobster Newberg is done. I mean, look at that. You would totally eat that, wouldn't you? But anyway, time to go in for the official taste. Let me go ahead and start with a little bit of that lobster meat. And because we cooked the lobster ourselves and did not overcook it, it's sweet and tender. But this is not the kind of dish you want to eat the components separately. Let's cut right in. And this is definitely a fork and knifer. I've never had much luck cutting puff pastry with just a fork. And as good as that lobster was on its own, when you combine that with that crispy, buttery puff pastry, which is all drenched and dripping with that amazing sauce, we are talking about a world-class bite of food. Oh, and by the way, if you ever happen to share a recipe with a friend that owns a restaurant, I would try to get them to sign something that prevents them from changing the name if you ever have a falling out. Hey, you never know. You don't want to end up getting anagrammed. But anyway, I really do hope you give this a try. Head over to foodwishes.com for all the ingredient amounts and more info as usual. And as always, enjoy.